Today, I'll be giving you guys a buyer's guide on the Samsung S95B. We're going to get right to the point and not waste any of your time, so smack like on this video, and let's dive right in by talking about whether I recommend it or not. And the safe answer is yes. This, in my personal view and professional view, is one of the best TVs money can buy. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about why. Hopefully you can stay through until the end and get the information you need, or if you get it a little bit earlier, that's cool too. So let's talk about the pricing. For the one thing that I think matters to everybody, obviously, nowadays is price. I can safely say as of October 1st, 2022, it is $1599.99, and that's for a 55-inch, which is way cheaper than the counterpart Oled on the market right now, which is Sony. So you're saving a ton of money in that aspect. And then if you go up to the 65-inch, it's literally half the price at $1999.99. Excellent pricing all around. And I couldn't speak highly enough about, like, if it was between this or maybe like the C2, for example, just buy this, because you can then be able to get a little bit more out of your investment with going with next generation technology, which, to be very honest, at the beginning of the year, we all thought when we heard Oled be announced, we thought it was going to be like $8,000. So to see this pricing so soon is just absolutely mind-blowing. Now, let's talk about some of the cool things. So unofficially, it supports 144 hertz. It says it's a native 120 hertz refresh rate, but you can go up to 144. So if you're a PC gamer, that's great news. For my energy conscious people, this does support solar charging. So again, that's one of the coolest things about this, in my opinion, that make it feel truly James Bond. And I really love how you can literally choose to use even like your lighting in your home. So it doesn't necessarily have to be like in a window in the sun or something like that. It can just use ambient lights to recharge, or you can use a USB-C cable, which, I mean, again, very, very awesome. Now, it can kind of accommodate a sound bar. If you have a bigger one, it'll be a little bit of a snug fit, but it can accommodate one. If you have a slimmer one, that's pretty much what you want. The slimmer, the better. But it does have that little cubby underneath for a sound bar. But again, the slimmer, the better. Otherwise, it's going to be a little bit snug. In terms of the technology that they're offering this year, it does tend to offer the gimmicky AI processing. Now, each company nowadays, they're trying to call it something different. LG calls it ThinQ on their end. Sony calls it their XR processor. And Samsung gives you a massive mouthful with the Neural Quantum Processor 4K. So it's a bit more to bite off. But again, that's just their deep learning processing. So don't be fooled by that. I can say, though, that it does add an awesome amount of depth and dimensionality over their prior models that didn't have this particular processor in it. So it is a benefit, but again, it's not like, oh my God, this is like the most deep learning thing I've ever seen. Like, it's not like some ultra smart computer, so don't think that about it. Now, in terms of their quantum HDR OLED, I mean, honestly, HDR is okay, but it still has some of the same issues that we've noticed with prior HDR. So if you're noticing that when you switch to certain content pieces, it tends to look a little washed out, or it's not quite as vibrant, you're still going to be running into that, menus that aren't optimized correctly and they still look a little sour. That's still going to be something that happens here. And if you're on PC, forget about it. All of PC is just pretty much ruined, and it just doesn't work with HDR. But if you're an HDR user, you probably already know these things, so I won't harp too much on that. But just be advised that even though you're spending more money, it's not necessarily going to break the mold, per se, or change the game for how this, handles HDR. Now, one of the really cool technologies this year is called the Real Depth Enhancer. Now, at first, this seems like a little bit more of a gimmick, but the more you watch this TV, the more you really start to see, like, it really does separate the foreground from the background. Now, they try to do, again, something similar to what Sony does with their cognitive processor, but they really do a great job. And then another thing that is totally not a gimmick this year is their laser slim design. Now, this has come under a lot of scrutinization because some people claim that on the 65 inches, I've noticed a lot more. They say that they get bent panels. So, I mean, that's one of those things that if you get that, just exchange it maybe. But I have the 55-inch and I don't have anything like that. So I can't speak to anyone else's experience, and I don't want to cheapen it or devalue it. But I can say that in my experience, I have not had that happen. Now, new this year is an eye comfort mode, but to be very honest with you, it's pretty pointless because it basically defaults to dynamic mode and limits what you can adjust. It's not very useful. and it doesn't really reduce the eye strain by removing the blue light like you traditionally would have with these modes. So I don't really know what it's particularly for, if I'm being honest. And smart calibration is a total and complete gimmick in that it's totally broken and it doesn't really work. So you'll find colors getting broken, you'll find things looking off. It just won't work. So if you were looking forward to that, don't, because they have not fixed that even still to this day. In terms of really awesome technology, though, their object tracking is just incredible. Like their Dolby Atmos and their object tracking sound, like that for me is what really made this TV like super next tier, because you go to a point where you can have awesome sound and it's so immersive. You get to moments where it's just like it's hard to believe like all of this incredible sound is coming from a TV. Now, again, it's not going to replace a dedicated sound system or anything like that, so don't feel that way, but it is pretty incredible. Now, for my accuracy buffs out there, or for my purists, you do have pretty awesome out-of-the-box color. So you wouldn't necessarily need to calibrate. Out of the box, you have delta errors way below 3, and then we're talking it's closer into the 150 mark. I mean, really, you really have insane accuracy. And then your color delta errors are pretty much, again, well below even the 2 mark. And again, it's you're in like the, you know, your 1 territory, your 1.5 territory, somewhere around there. It's pretty incredible. So again, it's pretty accurate already out of the box without needing any calibration. And that's huge, because usually you have to hire somebody to come on out and get the kind of accuracy that this thing delivers. And again, you know, don't let these kind of run-of-the-mill calibrators confuse you or charge you like $500 for a single calibration just to get you delta error of 3 or lower. Because I'll be very honest with you, as somebody who is a former professional calibrator, you do not see anything below a delta error of 3 or lower. So the guys touting around like, oh, I've got a 0.5 delta error, or oh, I've got 0.25 or whatever, it doesn't matter, because you can't see it. Only 3 or lower. And that's just what the science tells us. So if you are into the whole purist thing, that part there, hopefully that helps you. But again, for everyday usage and for normal people, that probably won't matter. And again, the big takeaway here is that the colors are reference accurate out of the box to look the way the director intended them to look, according to, again, the science. So again, that's pretty decent. In terms of, I would say, upscaling, though, it's a bit of a hit and miss at the same time. So it's not going to be as clear as something like the Sony. Sony does a great job when we talk about like older content, like sharpening up like older content in general, removing noise and stuff like that. Samsung does tend to struggle a little bit more, especially at the absolute lowest resolutions. But once you start getting up into like the higher resolutions, like 1080p, it's awesome. But again, that's not to say that it's bad or anything. It's just if you're watching like YouTube video and it starts to buffer out, you're going to notice that it looks a little bit worse on the Samsung than it probably would on the Sony. Now, the superstar of this entire TV, though, is color. I mean, this thing is an absolute monster, covering 100% of the DCI P3 color gamut and like 90% of BT 2020, which all that means in English is like our eyes are like the absolute pinnacle of what color spaces are trying to achieve. And right now, the closest to our human vision is BT 2020, and this TV covers over 90% of that. So that's absolutely incredible. It means you're going to be seeing far more realistic color than you've ever seen on any television. And it's able to kick off incredible color volume, because this thing hits over 1,500 nits of peak brightness, which in English just means this thing is incredibly bright and brighter than most high-end LED TVs. Now, immediately this does come with the concern like, oh my God, I'll get burn-in, because you don't want to make an OLED really bright if you've heard that brighter, you know, OLEDs tend to burn in. But I can tell you I've been using this thing myself personally every day as my everyday TV, and I haven't had even image retention, which really shocks me genuinely. Not even when I'm like on the Xbox home menu or nothing. I have seen no image retention. So it's an incredible TV, and even though it doesn't have the heatsink like Sony, it's performing at a level that's just absolutely unheard of, and I've never honestly experienced with OLED, which I think is really good as well. In terms of input lag, it's pretty incredible. I mean, you have an input lag under 10 milliseconds, which is just ridiculous. And then the higher you go, obviously, and your resolution and your refresh rate, usually that's where you start to see the bettering of your milliseconds. So like, for example, 120 hertz, you're going to be seeing like in the 5-ish millisecond mark. So again, it only gets better from there. And it's just a wonderful experience. It really is. It's a super low latency television. You won't have any real problems. So if you're a competitive gamer, then that's a huge benefit for you. Now, in terms of user interface, it is a bit sticky. So it does tend to get stuck a little bit more than I would like. You're going to have moments where it's just going to be sticking and you're going to be sitting here like, what the hell? And you're going to have to give it a moment to kind of catch up, right? But either way, it is one of those things that you will experience with pretty much all Samsung. So if that's not something that you like, then that is something to be aware of and take note of. Now, this does have HDR10, HDR10 Plus, but it does not have Dolby Vision, but it does have HLG. So basically Dolby Vision, again, with Samsung is the odd man out. This might be a big deal for some people, but for me, I genuinely don't find it a big deal because HDR10 is pretty much universal and it's better as far as the brightness kick that you get out in most situations versus the current Dolby Vision that we have. So I'm not really too hung up about that, but every person does have to make their determination as to if that's a big deal for them or not. Now, it does support full HDMI 2.0 bandwidth, and it does support full HDMI 2.1 bandwidth. So regardless on what port you use, whether it's 1 through 4, the biggest asset of this TV is it's forward and backwards compatible. So you're not going to have to sit here wondering if like maybe one port's going to drop down to HDMI 1.4. You have full bandwidth on everything with every current specification. And that's what makes this TV truly special, is like it can go into so many different strides for being future-proof that it's just not even funny. And I think that's really what I love the most about it. And again, it's not a perfect TV, right? It does have some problems, right, as we mentioned. But I think, honestly speaking, if you take all this information, you can pretty much figure out, like, it's a great TV with a lot to offer. And again, I haven't ever seen movies look as realistic or as wonderful as they have looked on this TV. And I think that's saying something. And again, I just love how thin the TV is. I love like the rechargeable remote, the sound, the image quality, bro. Like the colors on this thing have been the best out of every TV I've ever seen. And I think when that's the case, all you can really do is just sit here and, just say, wow. Like I found myself like really taken aback by it, like honestly. And I think if you go check it out at the store, have them take it out of torch mode, which is, the retail dynamic mode, and try to put something on that's normal. In Magnolia or whatever the case may be, you might see it too, man. I'm telling you, it's an amazing thing. If you have more questions about this product, of course, I'm here to help you out. If you end up buying this product, I have a service here where I, for $5, will give you an entire month subscription of all the TV settings that I pump out within that month versus greedy calibrators that'll charge you $5 or $500. So 5 versus 500, basically, that's what you're looking at. And I really take it beyond the reference standards and give you everything that you're looking for in terms of, next level image quality. So if that's something you're interested in, reach out to me. I'll help you out, give you a link so you can join and all that fun stuff. But other than that, hey, I'm here if you need any help. And I want to hear what you think about this product. Thanks for watching the #1 brand in honesty. And until the next video, I'll see you guys later.